have you been here at Deer Forest with different roles, or can you just explain?
I arrived last year, pretty much May 1st of 2013 for the old owner, John Modica, just shortly after the deer seizure that has kind of grown famous in this local area. But I was not part of this company at the time of that. When I arrived, there was no deer on the property. There were several other medical issues throughout the park, and I piloted the program to bring the deer back in 2013 later in the year, and then also have developed veterinarian programs throughout the whole park.
Okay. And can you just kind of clarify for me again, whatever you're comfortable with sharing? You said John Modica. What was his role before?
John Modica was a resident of Chicago, formerly owned the park, I believe, for 9 years. He was just an absentee owner. He truly is an animal lover. He's a decent guy to be around. He just does not know what he's doing in this type of setting. He provided a checkbook, and a pretty shallow one at that, for the park.
So when you came here in May, you were working under him for a little while. Is that right?
My only person that I looked up to after I arrived in May of 2013 was John Modica. Yes.
Okay. And when did his ownership, dwindle away, or when was that done?
Deer Forest Exotic Animal Sanctuary, which is now what we are, leased the property effective March 1st of 2014.
Okay. And can you kind of talk about that September 2013 inspection? What's happened since you've played a larger role?
When I arrived at the property, obviously it was shortly after the deer seizure. There were multiple pages of USDA write-ups, from this fence being down to this animal being skinny to no shelter provided, not enough veterinarian care. You name it, this park had the problem in for whatever reason, adhering to those guidelines. Shortly after my first inspection, we had our second inspection, which the 3 or 4 pages dwindled down to maybe 2. With our staff in place, we actually, shortly after that, which would have been September, I guess, received a USDA perfect inspection. Now, by no means does that mean that the park is perfect, but that means the general animal care guidelines were in place. There's food, water, and shelter for each animal. Each animal has had somewhat of a veterinarian inspection, and the park is on the right path at that point.
Okay. And out of curiosity, what kind of animals are here now?
There are equines, which are basically horses and donkeys. We have an endangered set of donkeys that just actually had a baby this past couple days. We've got reptiles, alligators, snakes, birds. We got an Arctic fox that is not on display right now. We have a few other animals that aren't on display for whatever reason, and also the USDA, and waiting for the USDA licensing.
Okay. And now that you mentioned that, I was wondering about that. I remember now when I spoke with the USDA yesterday, they did say you and your wife wanted to obtain a license. Is that just the process after John Modica left?
The process would have been much easier had John Modica not left us with such a headache as far as poor animal care. USDA is concerned going forward who ultimately is responsible for the animals and what's going to happen. It presents a very sticky situation for them that John Modica still currently owns the property and Deer Forest Exotic Animal Sanctuary only leases it. So we have to ensure them through their investigation that John Modica has nothing to do with this business, that the animals are 100% in the care of Deer Forest Exotic Animal Sanctuary, and that he is only the landowner, and that is it. That is, the investigation is only to make sure that he has nothing to do with this park going forward.
Okay, so as this investigation wraps up, whenever it does, I guess, are you hoping they will say he can no longer own the land and then it'll just be in your care? I mean, it is in your care right now.
It is in our care. He's always going to own the land as long as what we lease it, and that's fine as far as USDA standards go. They just want to make sure that he's not in here doing the daily upkeep of the animals, or that he really has no say in the animals. He is the landowner, and that is it.
Okay. And I read in some of those reports before May of 2013 that there had been animals that were malnourished,
Right.
not the right shelter, holes in the fence. Can you kind of talk about your knowledge of that before you came in and what you did to fix it all?
I visited the property probably in April, and the deer were here at that time that we visited prior to actually taking over in May. And I agree that you don't have to look around very far and see that this park needs a significant amount of work. But that's where we ask people to pick up a shovel instead of typing on their keyboard, and let's get this place going again, not throw mud at something that we already know is not top notch. So yes, there were holes in the fences, there were skinny animals, there were coat problems. I mean, you look at some of the deer, and they had probably patches of hair missing according to reports. You name it, we were dealt it when we got here, and through the work of our staff that I put into place, and through the veterinarian staff at our veterinarian, which is located in Broda, we put together a veterinarian care program, fixed a lot of issues. On this property as of right now, I don't believe that we have one single health issue in this whole park.
Okay, and out of curiosity, I mean, if it kind of wasn't a bad state when you came here, what kind of drew you to Coloma in this park?
Exactly that. It was. It needed somebody to pay attention to it, and I felt, being my background, I thought I could be the guy to do it. Despite what people say, I'm a true animal lover. I want what's best for this park, want what's best for this community, and ultimately want what's best for the animals. So I guess in my heart, if I turned away from it, I didn't know what was going to happen. So I dove in.
And do you think there's some confusion in the community about who, I mean, do you think people are thinking that you were managing the animals back before when John was?
I think they honestly thought I had something to do with John Modica. I met John Modica through a Craigslist post that he posted on Craigslist that the park was for sale. That's how I met John Modica. I had no clue about Deer Forest. I'd never been here as a kid. Again, I saw what the customers saw and knew that it needed to be fixed. The people in this area are very pro Coloma or pro Southwest Michigan. They can't stand an outsider, and at this point, I'm nothing but an outsider, and they're scared of what I'm going to do. If going forward with this park, so that's their hesitation with me ultimately.
And can you also talk about the decision to make it a nonprofit organization?
This park, from what I gather from local people and different people who have worked here over the years, is that what's happened to this park is it's always been owned by an outsider, minus maybe the first couple of owners. But probably in the last 30 years, it's been owned by an outsider, somebody in Chicago, that sucked the money right out of Deer Forest and would run off to Chicago and start other ventures and businesses with it. By turning it into a nonprofit, we again invested in the community. We invested in the park. We want this park to thrive, and by forming the nonprofit, we knew that we couldn't take the money and run. It has to stay in the park. That's part of being a nonprofit.
And I've heard, I'm not from the area, but I've heard a lot of stories about what the park used to be, back in the day of the 50s and 60s era. I guess, what do you hope to see it become under your management?
I would like to see it once again thrive. Just last year, we did a Make-A-Wish for an older gentleman that was had dementia. He was in a nursing home in Benton Harbor, and his very last wish was to pet a deer one last time. He was on the maintenance crew of the very first original owners. He watched this park open its gates for the very first time in 1949. Through his dementia, he had created a memories book of some sort, and it had pictures all throughout the 65 years of Deer Forest. And he said that you could not even see the next set of animals on opening day, and that's ultimately what I hope for it again. It's a big venture, and need a lot of community support and a lot of people who are true animal lovers to step forward and give this place a chance again.
And I don't know if I read this correctly in another article or so. Is there any hope to get more animals or more exotic animals of any kind, or is that?
They're ultimately, the sky's the limit. We've got people throughout the country that we've become friends with, not only through the past year at Deer Forest, but also that I've known through other ventures in my life. There's some people that we know that could legitimately get some serious animals here, and we're talking, big cat displays, we're talking elephants, we're talking giraffes. We've got 20 acres of unused potential in the back of Deer Forest. That 20 acres could be limitless. So it'll be very exciting to see where it goes over the next 10 to 20 years.
Yeah. And I was curious, how many acres is?
Deer Forest as a whole is 32 acres. The parking lot probably uses 10. The zoo itself probably uses another 10 to 15, leaving another 15 to 20 in the back. That's just service entrances and different things. And the parking lot it's way too big for what this park will ever be again. So it's probably going to take a section. The long-term plan is to take part of that parking lot and expand it also.
Okay. And I saw over there some rides or amusement things.
Mm-hmm.
Is there any hope to kind of bring that element back here?
I've answered this question a million times to people that walk in the door. Until Deer Forest does the animals perfectly, there will be no intention of bringing any kind of rides back. Once we can look at this park and say there's nothing new that needs to be added to serve the animals correctly, then that point will come. That point's very, very far away.
The accusations that maybe you had mistreated any animals. I mean, what do you say to that in your past?
There's when all that happened in Illinois, I simply went out of town. I was out of town for a few days. A few days turned into a week, maybe 10 days. I had hired 2 kids by kids I mean a 16-year-old and a 17-year-old, both boys, that had worked for me in Illinois, so they knew exactly what they were doing with dogs. But I had never really left out of town for any significant amount of time. So I think that they saw some money coming in, but they weren't quite ready for the responsibility for whatever reason. When I came back to Illinois, I was disappointed at the care that my dogs received in Illinois when I was gone. So I see what people see. There's 2 sides to every story. There's a little bit more there than what people will ever be willing to admit. I've shared some documents with you that I think that had you heard that side of the story, maybe yesterday's story wouldn't have quite been as serious as what it was. But there's some significant points that weren't made yesterday.
And I guess with your history of breeding dogs,
Mm-hmm.
did you ever? Was there ever a time where the puppies were sick or malnourished from your account?
No. By the time they left my kennel, located in Chandlerville, Illinois, they all had their shots. They all had multiple wormings. They had different medications. Did I ever have a sick puppy? I think every breeder will tell you at some point they have. But no puppy ever went home sick. Now, did it develop a sickness on the other end when those people got the dog home? I don't know. If I knew, I would have done everything I could to fix it. But you know, there's every breeder, and I think every responsible breeder will tell you that when you get an 7-8-week-old puppy from any breeder, you shelter that puppy within your home, and you bleach things properly. If you ever had another dog, you don't take it to the city park, you don't take it to PetSmart, you don't do this where they can pick up a million different diseases. Because once that puppy leaves my kennel where everything is sterilized and clean, and it goes out in the community and picks up a dog of poop, a piece of poop from another dog, there's no telling what that dog had. There's just no way to control that environment. So we recommend people to shelter their puppies for a couple months within the confines of their own home. And then as it starts to grow physically and as the immune system grows, then that's when you start taking it out.
That they had, wanted a refund for these puppies they claimed were sick. From a breeder's business perspective,
there is not one person that approached me about a refund. Kelly Radke received this puppy, and I've got Facebook video to prove it, and I believe that will be airing on your guys' news. When they received the puppy, it was a very healthy, very average puppy. Again, what did they expose it to? I don't know. And again, I can't control that situation or that environment. I think over time, they wanted a refund because I was approached by her husband that her son, Kelly Radke's son, had developed some sort of allergy to the dog. And again, I've got Facebook messages, not necessarily of that part, but how they said that they were disappointed to see the dog go, but they were excited that the dog was going back to the breeder, that it could be used for what it was intended to be. They ultimately thought they were going to receive some money for that dog, and that just wasn't the case. I never, your son develops allergies as a breeder. That's not, I'm sorry to say, but that's not my problem. I don't want to be insensitive to it, but it was a business, and it did thrive on reputation, and it just wasn't in my best interest to take a dog that I had not trained and try to resell it. It just didn't fit.
That makes sense.
Didn't fit my business plan.
Yeah. And with Amanda, is that a similar story with her lab that she said was sick as well?
They had, when they approached me, they had went through probably 4 or 5 dogs at the time. For whatever reason, this dog didn't do this and this dog didn't do that. It got to be a problem to where, from a trainer's aspect, they really have no business having a dog. Their kids are very rambunctious. They do have cognitive disability, I believe. They just didn't understand the protocol when you bring a puppy into the house. There's certain things that have to happen. You have to develop the dog's confidence. You have to teach it things through repetition and good experiences. Their kids were just constantly just hammering on the dog and overbearing to it and picking it up and dragging it by its neck, which for a normal puppy, that's all part of life. But when you're talking about a working dog, those working dogs have to have different experiences than what a normal puppy does.
Okay. And finally, we'll just brush on Nicole's situation, if you like. She had claimed that her German Shepherd was abused with nearly life-threatening injuries, and she had to put him down. And you kind of brushed on this earlier. You had asked, 2 kids to take care of those dogs.
Again, when I went out of town, the dog was left in a kennel at my kennel, which consisted of an 8 by 6.5 run. The dogs were let out daily to exercise and different things when they needed to stretch their legs. When I was out of town, that probably didn't happen because the kids were afraid of some dogs, and Dirk being one of them. Dirk came to me for some severe aggression issues. Had went after some kids in the neighborhood of Nicole's. She dropped the dog off to me, hoping that I could fix some of the issues. Shortly after she dropped it off, I started texting her that the dog was just, he was set in his ways. He was 2.5 years old, I think maybe even 3 at the time. He had developed some severe aggression issues towards people and different animals for whatever situation. The dog needed to be in some sort of working home. He had phenomenal drives. His prey drive was off the radar. His aggression was perfect for a working situation. In a home situation, it's a liability. But for a police dog trainer or a perimeter dog is what I had him was going to have him used for. He fit the bill perfectly, and through text messages, Nicole had agreed to give the dog to me, and I just when I went out of town, he was in one of those wooden kennels. When I got back from out of town, or in the process of, I was told that he was moved from one of the wooden kennels to the dog trailer by whoever. I don't even know who moved him. Come to find out, it was animal control. Throughout the years, I've learned that animal control actually moved him, put him in that trailer just basically because they felt it was more secure because he was actively going after the kids. So it was a bad situation. I should have probably taken the dog with me out of town. I was shopping for a house in Indiana. I was busy beyond belief, but hindsight, I probably should have taken the dog with me.
And there was a court document that said that you had pleaded guilty to, neglect of your ownership duties and animal cruelty, and that was that situation then?
That was that situation. It was either get into a he said she said battle with the state and with the Cass County, Illinois, or just accept that when I came back the situation wasn't ideal, and that ultimately, even though I was out of town, I was responsible. It was easier at that point to just take the $250 fine and move on with my life, or pay a lawyer $5,000 to $10,000 for a he said she said battle that who knows how it would have turned out anyways. So, I had the opportunity at the time to recuse myself from those charges and actually sue the 2 boys that were involved, that were taking care of the dog kennel. Again, they're 16 and 17 years old. They didn't need that in their life. So I did what I felt was right and stood up to it and took it.
Okay, let's see. I may have seen on that other Facebook page about animals getting loose. This is back to Deer Forest now.
Okay.
Have you had any problems with any animals getting loose?
When we took over the park this March, the park, again, you don't have to look very far to see a fence that needs fixed or a wall that for whatever reason has rotted out or this or that. Again, this park is in bad shape, and we all know it. And again, this is part of what draws us here, is that we are making it better daily. So throughout I take that back, that was the second time that in the fall, under the previous ownership, the donkeys had got out then, which are an endangered species of donkeys, and they're very closely related to a zebra, so they're very flighty and very, no matter what you give them, they're just not happy. They want to run. I mean, they just want to run. And so they had gotten out in the fall, and we had St. Joe County Animal Control come over here with a dart gun, and they were able to dart the donkey to slow her down enough to where we can get our hands on her and get her in the trailer and get her back home. In the spring, it happened again. They had found another weak point in the fence. They once they find the first weak point, they push and push and push. They know right where that hole is. They finally got out. And we had actually chased the donkeys around this whole property, and they were actively looking for a place to get back in. They had learned over time that obviously they were being fed here and that life was fairly well, so they wanted back in the park. We just had all the exits closed. So with talk with some other animal people, they said, oh, if they're constantly checking to see if the doors are open, why don't you open the doors and let them back in and just sit back and wait? So that was our plan of attack. We went to bed that night. They were on the back side of the park. We left all the entrances open to the whole park, thinking that if they were walking the perimeter, they'd eventually wander in. Well, that's exactly what happened, and they literally walked straight to the hay feeder when they got back in the morning.
Okay, and I wanted to ask too, I guess we kind of touched on this. You moved from Indiana here to Coloma.
Mm-hmm.
And was it the park that's what drew you here?
Yeah, that's the only reason I came.
Okay.
I would not be in Coloma, Michigan if it wasn't for Deer Forest.
It's a nice place, but I understand. I would never think to move here, I guess. And I guess one more question. What kind of, where did you kind of decide or when that you wanted, to work with animals? Was that like an early on decision in your life? Or?
Yeah, I think I probably couldn't have been but 10, 12 years old. I had a fascination with German Shepherds at the time. I always wanted to understand why it is that dogs would work for you and people wouldn't. So it was a fascination of learning the cognitive ability of a dog and their drive set to what makes them a working dog versus a couch potato. And I just started to expand that throughout my life. I'm very avid in dog psychology. If there's a problem with a certain dog, I can probably tell you why it's doing it or what you need to do to fix it. Working dogs have always been an interest of mine. A lot of people that are pet owners don't understand why a police dog would risk its life daily for that police handler, or why a duck hunting dog, a retriever of some sort, would want to jump in ice cold water to go get somebody's duck and bring it back to them. They don't understand, and those dogs are unfortunately just treated very differently than a couch potato dog. Your dog at home has no interest in getting off the couch on a warm 70-degree house in the middle of winter to go jump in ice cold water. So to make that dog do that, it's treated very differently. It's not treated unfair. They still have very good lives, but it's a very good life in a different manner.
Okay, and I guess is there anything else that you want to add that I maybe missed or didn't ask?
We've always asked that people just come and talk to us. That's all we want. There's a document behind everything that I've said. I am not a person to be alarmed of. I am the person who wants to bring Deer Forest back. I'm the person who wants to see this place thrive again, not only for the community and its workers, but also just the sake of having Deer Forest. It belongs in this community. It is very, very close. Had we not been here, Deer Forest would have been closed this year. It's very close financially to shutting its doors. And us being here gave it a breath of fresh air. So we ask that people embrace that instead of kind of faulting us before we ever get started.